On the morning of February the 9th, 1855, a chilly frost settled over Devonshire. Farmers, merchants and mothers emerged from their homes, opened their businesses and set about their morning chores in the eerie stillness of freshly fallen snow. Across the county, people made an alarming discovery: cloven hoof prints that matched no man or beast that the good citizens of Devon had ever encountered. In this rural landscape where news spread from neighbour to neighbour at lightning speed and Victorian-era superstitions ruled, it didn't take long for panic to grip the countryside. By mid-afternoon, hundreds of men were scouring the fields, forests and glens in search of the mysterious creature that had left a trail of prints stretching for 100 miles. For over a century and a half, the incident that became known as the Devil's Footprints has haunted Devon. But who, or indeed, what made these bizarre prints? Farming at this time of year is often a miserable task, but not in the world of today's sponsor, Heyday. The start of the year is always a challenging period, so it's important to take time out and relax. And cozy games like Heyday can help. In Heyday, you can build and expand your very own farm, adding no end of personalization. As a music fan, I like to add things like the saxophone, guitar, and tuba. You'll also get to grow and harvest crops at your own pace, as unlike real life, they never go bad. If it takes your fancy, you can then use them to create and sell homemade goods. There are numerous cute farm animals and pets that you'll get to meet along the way as well. All this, and you also get to join a friendly community where you can trade goods and compete in weekly events. Until February 15th, you can get a pack containing 16 items, including my favourites if you use the special link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Once you've downloaded the game, simply use the link or QR code again to collect your goodies. So, what are you waiting for? Download Heyday today and enjoy some cozy farming. Devon, situated in the southwest corner of England, is known for its rugged beauty. Its two coastlines, one bordering the English Channel to the south and another bordering the Irish Sea and Bristol Channel in the north, are home to dramatic towering cliffs and long miles of beaches. The county's interior is dominated by rolling fields, tracts of heath and green moors. While the Devon of today is a haven for tourists, the Devon of 1855 was one of farmers eking out a living, a declining mining industry, and craggy isolation. Life in rural Devonshire revolved around the never-ending struggle to feed your family and the respite of faith, religion, and superstition. Because of its stagnant agricultural population and the isolated nature of the district, Devon clung to customs and superstitions that had been largely phased out in other parts of the country. A 19th century volume on folklore outlined a few of the more interesting beliefs. A case of boils can be cured by walking around a freshly dug grave 6 times, then crawling across it 3 times. Beekeepers must inform their hives of news of the household to keep their colonies happy. The doors and windows of the house must be set open when a funeral procession leaves and a shoe is thrown after a new bride for luck. The people of Devonshire were accustomed to moving through their day with an eye trained toward omens and indications of luck, good or bad. So when they discovered the cloven prints upon the snow that fateful February day, the impact was instantaneous and profound. The winter of 1855 was unusually cold in the south of England. The temperatures remained around freezing well into the new year, and many rivers were frozen. Slushy snow never thawed, creating a crunchy ground covering as temperatures dropped in the night. The unusual weather pattern made folks uneasy. Nearly everyone relied on predictable temperatures and precipitation to make a living. The beginning of February was marked by heavy snowfall, a rarity in a place that usually only sees a few light snow showers each year. On the night of February the 8th, the weather was particularly foul. Heavy snow gave way to freezing rain and wild winds. In the morning, a hard frost cemented the ground, freezing in place the evidence of each footfall upon the snow. At 6 o'clock, a baker named Henry Pilk emerged from his bakehouse in the small town of Topsham to admire the effect of the sparkling landscape. He noticed a line of peculiar prints in the snow. Each print resembled a small horseshoe, roughly the size of a donkey's hoof. But unlike a donkey, pony, or other pack animal, the prints were not in the staggered gait of a four-footed beast. Instead, they formed two straight lines, as if whatever creature had left them walked upon 2 feet, not 4. The strangest part, though, was that the prints started at the wooden fence, approached the side of the bakehouse, and then turned again back toward the fence. Henry Pilk spent a few minutes pondering the strange tracks, then returned to his bakehouse and became absorbed in the busy morning work of a baker. An hour later, Mr. Pilk's yard was flooded by a group of local men, including Albert Brailford, the local schoolmaster. The group had followed a set of strange tracks from the road to Henry Pilk's yard. In fact, the same hoof marks were visible outside nearly every house in the street, in several adjoining streets, and in the fields beyond. Most perplexing of all, the tracks seemed to follow a path no man or beast could feasibly walk. Some of the tracks led into gardens surrounded by 12-foot stone walls. Sometimes the tracks jumped up onto roofs, over snow-covered wagons, and through fences. The tracks never faltered or doubled back. They simply continued on to the other side of the obstacle, as if whatever had left them had the ability to walk through walls and jump enormous distances. The people of Topsham soon discovered that they were not the only ones visited by the mysterious track lever. The trail led across towns, villages, and lonely farmsteads between Topsham and Totnes, spanning nearly 100 miles. In Mamhead, a farmer followed the print across an open field and up to an 18-foot-high haystack covered in snow. The haystack itself was unmarked, with no prints leading around it, but the tracks continued on the other side. At the Exe River estuary, the trail led up to the western bank and continued on the opposite shore, seeming to have jumped across the wide expanse of water without faltering. In Lympstone, every garden in the village had been visited, as though whatever had left the tracks had peered into the windows of each home. Each print measured about 3 to 4 inches long and about 2 inches across. The steps were smaller than an animal's gait, about 8 to 16 inches apart in a single file. The creature's legs appeared to be about 6 inches apart. By mid-afternoon, the women and children in Devon were locked snugly inside their homes. The landscape swarmed with men and dogs armed for hunting, though they knew not what creature they sought. Some of the men believed they'd find a farm beast the size of a donkey. Others thought it was possible they were hunting the devil himself. For who else would walk upon 2 cloven feet and have the ability to jump onto roofs and walk through walls? The superstitious feared that Satan had visited the Devonshire countryside, marking out possible victims for future nefarious plans. But the prints had largely faded by evening, and the hunters were left bewildered. Though no beast had been found, the rumours around the mystery grew increasingly outlandish. Folks swore they'd seen the hoof marks glow like live coals in one town. In another, farmers said they'd heard devilish laughter echoing through lonely glades. The educated staunchly unsuperstitious, laughed at these claims, certain that the Prince of Darkness was not responsible for the cloven prints. But they offered no alternative explanation, and a ghostly feeling of dread settled across the moors and glens of Devonshire. The Exeter and Plymouth Gazette published a letter from a Devon man outlining the strange incident. It read, in part, "The creature seems to have advanced to the doors of several houses and then to have retraced its steps. But no one is able to discern the starting or resting point of this mysterious visitor. Everyone is wondering, but no one is able to explain the mystery. The poor are full of superstition and consider it little short of a visit from old Satan or some of his imps." Truman's Exeter Flying Post published a piece on the footprints and called it an excitement worthy of the Dark Ages. The Illustrated London News included drawings of the tracks collected from several Devon residents, sparking months of suggestions from readers on what may have left the strange prints. Letters to the paper from zoologists and naturalists speculated that the prints had been made by the hind foot of a badger or a great bustard. Others suggested it may have been an errant otter or a high-hopping frog. One writer said the footmarks described by your Devon correspondent are made, in my opinion, by the poor, despised and insignificant rat. Another claimed the tracks were those of a unipede or uniped, a rarely sighted bird that had apparently been spotted by the Icelandic explorer Björn Jörjulfsson in Labrador in the year 1011. In his description, Björn states the bird had a single leg with a hoof-like foot, and instead of flying, it is said to have hopped long distances. But with no evidence remaining to be examined firsthand, the mysterious nighttime visitor remained unnamed. Many believed the marks could be the work of a mischievous prankster, perhaps wearing specially designed shoes to leave the perplexing prints. This suspicion was not without merit. The Victorian era was surprisingly rife with pranks. In 1839, the Baltimore Sun published a story about a prankster filling a pepper mill with gunpowder to surprise Sam, his unsuspecting cook. The prankster wrote, "Boiler blown up, scalding cat and 3 kittens who jumped about, giving fine specimens of animal magnetism. Sam, with a live coal in his eye, dancing about, blind with rage, cleared the shelves of crockery with his toasting fork and, coming to anchor in a large block tin dish cover, sat down to swear. Never laughed so much in my life." In 1862, the Reading Times reported that a reader paid the town watchman to rap on his door and shout "fire." The reader's wife ran into the street naked. A group of women in New Orleans concocted a passionate love letter asking that the receiver meet the writer with a white rosette in his buttonhole under the post office clock. The next evening, 52 young men with white rosettes assembled under the clock at 8 p.m. Not all pranks were harmless, however. I think we covered that with that lunatic and the pepper mill. In 1883, a railroad engineer in Colorado nearly caused an accident when he braked suddenly to avoid hitting what he believed was a man on the railroad tracks. It turned out to be an April Fool's prank. In 1896, a man in Wichita, Kansas, disguised himself as a tramp to frighten his wife. The woman fainted and died an hour later. It seemed entirely possible that someone had taken advantage of a snowy night to lead their neighbors on a ceaseless hunt for an imaginary creature. At once, people were imagining what lengths the prankster had gone to in creating the trail of prints. Perhaps a wheel with hoofs affixed at 8-inch intervals that could be trundled along the ground. Or maybe a printmaker that fitted over the hoaxer's own shoes. But technical impossibilities stumped the theorists. A hoaxer would have only about 6 hours of darkness to execute the prank, which stretched for nearly 100 miles, meaning he'd need to be moving at a rate of over 16 miles per hour. And it still didn't explain how the tracks managed to jump walls and onto roofs. Plus, no one could think of a likely candidate for such a prank. Who would want to spend one of the coldest, wettest nights of the year trampling through the countryside, leaving tracks that might very well be gone before morning? Reverend Musgrave of Mamhead sent sketches of the marks to the British Museum, the Zoological Society and the director of Regent's Park Menagerie in London. Musgrave also wrote to the London Illustrated News about his personal theory for the tracks. He believed they belonged to a kangaroo, which had escaped from some circus or animal show travelling through Devon. But while a kangaroo does hop on 2 legs, it keeps its legs parallel, leaving a distinct double trail. Plus, there was no real similarity between the hoof prints in Devon and that of a kangaroo. Other preachers were less interested in possible animal theories. Many Devonshire clergymen used the prints to great effect in their sermons, hinting at ominous signs in our midst to encourage their parishioners to correct their immoralities. For weeks, locals who'd encountered the prints or even just heard of them in passing moved with fear. They avoided the areas where the prints had been spotted, calling them Devil's Walks. Farmers often armed themselves when they went into their fields, and people began scanning the ground carefully each morning on alert for new tracks. But there was no recurrence of these strange hoof marks, and with time, the story of the devil's footprints became more folklore than fact. But it remains a compelling mystery that inspires new theories even today. One popular theory is that the tracks were left by an experimental balloon released by mistake from Devonport dockyard. The balloon left the tracks by trailing 2 shackles on the end of its mooring ropes. This theory came from author Geoffrey Household, who claimed his source was a local man named Major Carter, whose grandfather worked at Devonport at the time. Carter claimed the incident had been hushed up because the balloon also caused damage to several conservatories, greenhouses and windows. Whilst this could explain the shape of the prints and their ability to jump walls and haystacks, skeptics disagree about whether a balloon could travel such a long, zigzagging course without becoming entangled in a tree or other obstruction. Others believe that the prints were from an animal, like a wood mouse or badger. The print left behind when a mouse leaps resembles that of a cloven animal due to the motions of its limbs when it jumps. In July 1855, Professor Owen argued that a badger could be responsible since it was the only plantigrade quadruped we have in this island and leaves a footprint larger than would be supposed from its size. But with each new suggestion of a possible animal culprit, there are anomalies that preclude each species. Whether it is that the hoof prints do not match the animal's tread, or that the animal must have been bipedal or cannot fly. However, the wind and rain on the night the prints were left may have disfigured the footprints' original formations. Perhaps the most likely culprit is the human imagination. In his paper, The Devil's Hoof Marks, researcher Mike Dash concluded that the prints were likely the combination of several different factors. Some of the tracks were likely hoaxes made after news of the original tracks began to spread. Others were made by donkeys and ponies or by birds and wood mice. Each of these sets of tracks were unremarkable and only slightly similar, but when linked together over 100 miles, they became the work of a single unknown beast. The lack of contemporary evidence and witness accounts means we will likely never know the true source of the devil's footprints. Some people are sure it was a balloon. Others believe it was a case of mass hysteria. Some have even attributed the prints to cryptids and, of course, aliens. Some, however, still believe that the devil walked through Devonshire on that snowy night in 1855. Thank you for watching, and thank you to today's sponsor, Heyday. And don't forget, you can play for free today by using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen now. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.